All right, everybody, what's going on? And welcome to today's edition of Swag Talk, the show we cover the swag inside and out. I'm your tour guide around the swag, see Wells coming at you. And as you can see today, man, we're going to just do a little bit of way back Wednesday. We're going to take a step back and look at some of the best single season performances since the year 2000. This is something I've been working on for a while, and it's not easy, coming up with this stuff because finding info on the SWAC past the year 2018 is dicey at best. So I couldn't make a list as great as I wanted to, and I couldn't make a list as in depth as I wanted to. But I just kind of wanted to put some names out there, and just give some of these guys some light who may not get that light, or some of them who have. So we're gonna run through these. We're gonna talk about these and go from there. So with that being said, man, y'all check out the socials. Facebook is Swag Talk, Instagram Swag Talk, Twitter Swag Talk 76. Also, don't forget the email swagtalk76@gmail.com. We're starting a new segment on Swag Smoke. Actually, we're starting a couple new segments. One of them we already started last week, so I'm gonna talk about that one a little bit more. The other one we're gonna roll it out as we get to it. We're doing rewatches of old SWAC games. So if you wanna have a suggestion of a game that's already on YouTube, it don't matter what year it is, but if it's on YouTube, we'll pull it up, we'll watch it and talk about it on the show. You can watch it and chime in on the chat as well. So feel free to hit the socials if you got an idea for one of those shows. Um, and then don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, comment, and just sit back and enjoy. So we're gonna go ahead and start this off. Um, First off, before we go into the single season efforts, I wanted to give some flowers to a player who I think is one of the best quarterbacks in the SWAC in the SWAC in a long time that doesn't really get the recognition, and that's Darnell Kennedy from Alabama State. This guy totally rewrote the record books at Bama State. He played at Bama State 97 to 2001, missed 99 with an injury, but he was a guy who turned. Bama State's teams weren't the greatest at that point in time, but I thought he was a guy who put up some tremendous numbers. Did lead them to a SWAC championship berth in 2001, and really had some tremendous numbers. And I just wanted to give him that recognition because, like I said, I don't think that when you talk about SWAC quarterbacks and names, that's a name that I don't really see too often coming up, and I don't I think that's not good because that's a guy who is he's a Alabama State Hall of Famer now, and he's a guy who put up tremendous numbers. Like I said, didn't play for the greatest of teams, so sometimes people are always gonna hold that against you. But when you look at his career numbers, he is the all-time leader in career total offense with over 12,888 yards. He also is the all-time leading passer in a career with 11,753 yards and 102 touchdowns. Those numbers are more than double any guy, almost more than double than the second place guy. So when you look at his numbers and everybody after him, the gap is huge. So you really have to put some respect on his name. He had guys like Damon Hodge who finished number two in receptions with 176 and 2,280 yards and 21 touchdowns. That was one of his top guys back in that time. Um, Kenneth Watson was another guy who caught a lot of passes from him. So he benefited from a nice air attack. Played under three coaches, so again that continuity really wasn't there. But with a guy who played 2 years, missed a year with injury, then played 2 more years and missed the first two games of his senior year, to still have a great season like he did in 2001, which was 400. Excuse me. His 2001 season. Why did I lose it? He threw for 3,151 yards and 33 touchdowns. In 2000, he threw for 3,488 yards and 33 touchdowns. Uh, 98, he threw for 2,409 yards and 19 touchdowns. His freshman year, he threw for in 97, he threw for 2,378 yards and 19 touchdowns. So as you can see, this was a guy whose numbers, really improved every year. Like I said, numbers took a little bit of a step back in his senior year, but that's because he missed 2 games. Um, but once he was there, the team got it back together and they were able to go to a SWAC championship. Um, so I really wanted to, recognize him individually, because, like I say, whenever you talk about SWAC quarterbacks, name never really comes up. So I wanted to give him his flowers and salute him, because this was a guy who started his freshman year and stayed the course, had some tribulations and turmoil, adversity, fought back, had some more adversity, fought back, and left the school as the all-time leading passer by far. So wanted to recognize that. Another name that this name is never not talked about, and that's Bruce Eugene. In 2005, he threw for 4,408 yards and 56 touchdowns with only 6 interceptions. Um, Probably one of the greatest single seasons ever. Again, this was a guy who missed the '04 season with injury, came back and just wrecked shop. So, he could have not bounced back. He could have, packed it in, but he had his greatest season after an injury. And that's why I feel like Bruce Eugene is the greatest quarterback from the year 2000 on. I can, you can give me Kincaid, you can give me Glass, you can give me Shador if you want to throw him in now. I'm gonna go with Bruce Eugene every time, man. Like I said, the guy, he just found ways to make plays. When you look at him, you don't really expect it, and then lo and behold, man, he hitting you for 405 touchdowns and probably 40, 50 yards on the ground. So I thought his 2005 season was probably the best on this list. Um, Really wanted to put him in there, although that's elementary. Akil Glass is another quarterback who left with some high accolades. In 2019, he threw for 3,600 yards and 32 touchdowns. He did have 11 interceptions that year. In 2021, he threw for 3,568 yards and 36 touchdowns and only 7 interceptions. That spring season, I didn't really pull up the stats for the spring season, but he had a really good season that during the spring, led the team to a championship berth and win. Um, Started as a freshman in 18, got better as his career went on, and left as probably one of the top quarterbacks in the SWAC, one of the top quarterbacks in Alabama A&M history. Had a bunch of great seasons and was a guy who you could count on to put up great numbers anytime he played. Another name who, if he stayed where he was for the bulk of his career, he would probably leave as the greatest quarterback in the conference in this time period, because I don't think his numbers would have dropped off that much. And that should do it, Sanders. I know that name, and the Sanders name is not spoken of, but you can't take away from him what happened outside of him. In 2 years at Jackson State, in 2021, he threw for 3,230 yards and 30 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. In 22, he threw for 3,752 yards, 40 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. Those are amazing numbers. And you really can't take that away from him. Um, like I said, you can say prime this, prime that, whatever. But modern time, he could have been one of the best quarterbacks to come through the SWAC. It's a shame that he left when they did, because I think he was on the verge of setting and breaking a lot of records, and I would have loved to see him continue his time in the SWAC. But that is what it is. Also from Jackson State, Casey Terrio, 2011, he threw for 3,808 yards and I believe it was 26 touchdowns. I tried to add it up, but my math sucks. So, but again, guy had a great offense around him. and really was able to put up tremendous numbers. And Ivy League probably. I mean, it just not probably the greatest white quarterback to come through the SWAC. I mean, I know it's not a lot of those, but when you talk about actual production on the field, hands down, man. He, he's the greatest of the few. But he was a guy who could definitely make plays. He could air it out, and JSU just was unable to get over the hump in those years to get that title that they probably should have gotten in that time period. I want to look at a few running backs. Um, Malcolm Cyrus, that's a name I know a lot of people probably, unless you're a Bama State person, you probably haven't heard that name. You haven't heard it since 2014. But he had a great 2014 season. He ran the ball for 1,497 yards on the season. Just a really, really, really great guy to run the ball. Again, not the greatest team, but when you look at the numbers that he put up, you can't argue that. And he's one of those guys who I think is the reason why we decided to even do this. Him and Raymond Weber from Pine Bluff. Those are two guys who um, obviously don't get the recognition that they deserve from people for having great seasons. Sometimes sometimes you can be a guy who has a great career and you put up good numbers every year. And then sometimes you can be a guy who puts up, you know, a tremendous season and then doesn't really do a lot after that. And sometimes guys jump out of nowhere. And Malcolm Cyrus was one of those guys. I mean, when you look at his career before 2014, he ran for 1,241 yards his entire time at Bama State before in his first 3 years, and 31 touchdowns. Had 17 touchdowns. Excuse me, no, that's reception. And 11 touchdowns. Yeah, 6 touchdowns on the ground in 2013. And then, like I said, he blew up after that. So sometimes you have guys who just kind of come out of nowhere, and he was one of those guys. Being able to put up great numbers in an offense that at that point, Alabama State was they weren't bad, but they weren't really you know really great either. So just having a guy who was able to do that, and after that period, Bama State offense would be down for a few years. In the next few years until recently. So that's a guy who, like I said, who really put up solid numbers. Bama State was 7-5 in 2014. So again, not a bad team, not a great team, but they were okay. And he had some big games that year. So I wanted to recognize him for his efforts. Also on the um, running back front, Ladarius Owens. Last season finished with 1,369 yards, 11 touchdowns. Um, was the offense for TSU. Even though to carry the load once they lost Andrew Body and Jace Wilson took over. Getting him comfortable, having a guy like Ladarius Owens, who his last few games he went for over 100 yards against all of the top rushing defenses in the conference, including over 200 against Southern. Um, and he was a great return man. He filled in that role, and so he was able to do a lot for this team. And I still feel like he should have got more recognition than he did from the league. But running backs don't really get that love. Also, a running back who put up great numbers. His team again wasn't spectacular, but he was able to put up really good numbers and a really good offense. That's Jordan Bentley from Alabama A&M. He's a guy who ran the ball for over 1,400 yards. During this time, Bama A&M didn't really share the ball with the running game, and so he got the bulk of the carries, and he finished with 1,417 yards and 18 touchdowns. And he was also a guy who could catch the ball out of the backfield. Um, it didn't really, didn't again doesn't really get a lot of hype for being a solid contributor. This was a team that was 7-5. This was Coach Mano's second year, I believe. Team went 6-5 the year before, 7-5, and then spring championship, then 7-3, 4-7, and 5-6. So during that time, that offense was tremendous. They took a huge jump from 18 to 19, and he was one of the reasons for that. Guy who really made it tough for you as a fan to watch him move the ball because he was gonna get the ball. Bama State didn't really rotate backs a lot, so he was definitely gonna get the ball, and he could be a force to be reckoned with. Next is a three pack of Alcorn guys, man. But when you think all running the ball, Alcorn comes up, especially in these last, in this run that Alcorn's been on. They've had some great running backs, and I recognize three of them. Jarvion Howard, Agent Zero. He had 1,275 yards in 2022 and 12 touchdowns. Guy was a load to bring down when you watch him run the football. Always took more than one guy to get him on the ground, and he was always able to get those extra yards, and he still could bust one for distance. He had great speed for his size, and if he got loose, he was gone. Um, the Lance Turner, another guy who was a really great back, 1,400 yards in 2017, 10 touchdowns. That's that peak of that Alcorn run through the East. They had great quarterback play, but they were able to run the ball on you and be very physical. And so Turner was a guy who could help that running game going. And earlier in that time period, Arnold Walker also ran for over 1,191 yards and 16 touchdowns. So we wanted to recognize those three guys because when you think running the ball, Alcorn definitely is in the mix in that. And when Alcorn can run the ball, everything else opens up for them, and they don't hesitate to be physical. Next, I wanted to kind of recognize some wide receivers, and we're going to keep this at offense because, like I said, getting numbers on a lot of other guys um, was kind of difficult, and maybe we'll work on some more and do a defensive list. But I want to recognize a few wide receivers, and the reason we'll start off with a recent guy, and this is a guy who was new in the SWAC at that time, and a lot of people didn't really know who didn't know who he was if you didn't really follow other conferences, and that's Xavier Smith for FAMU. If you knew FAMU, you knew who he was. But he came into the SWAC and then in 2022 he had 87 catches for 1,021 yards and 11 touchdowns. Was definitely a guy who could make a lot of plays for this team, um, and was a guy who definitely made it happen. When you look at what they had, he was definitely the key weapon for them in those with those teams. And when you look at receivers, the numbers aren't really being put up like that in the SWAC right now. Mainly, is the teams aren't really as consistent passing the ball, so a lot of those numbers aren't great anymore. It's not saying that it can't be, but right now, it is not really. But you want to recognize a guy like that for putting in the work and getting his team to a great spot. The next guy who I want to talk about, and this was basically the guy who was the inspiration for this list, and that's Raymond Weber from Pine Bluff. When I talk about guys who they may not have been great leading up to their time, but they were contributors, and then they blew up. He would be the definition of that. And he had in 2010 he had 101 receptions. He was the only other guy besides Jerry Rice to catch over 100 passes in the SWAC. 101 receptions, 1,429 yards, and 10 touchdowns. Um, that's I mean that's an understatement to say that was an amazing season, but that was a very 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 excellent season. Um, on a team who was not, they were 5-6, so you look at this team, they were 5-6. Then they went 6-5. Then they won a SWAC championship in 10-2 after after he left. But that guy is the type of guy that I like to look at and see those kind of numbers because you just never know who can put their name in the books. And when you have a season like that, your name is always going to go in the books. Um, I don't even know we'll see another guy catch 100 passes in the SWAC. It's always possible, but I really don't know. But he did it, and you definitely had to recognize that and salute that. The next name I want to talk about is Chad Williams from Grambling. Again, he was a very consistent, solid guy. But in 2016, he caught 90 passes for 1,337 yards and 11 touchdowns. That's a guy who tremendous numbers. Offense played in a great offense with a guy like Devontae Kincaid at quarterback. That was one of the best Grambling teams in that time period. Won a Celebration Bowl in that time period. Won SWAC twice. Should have beat Arizona in 2017, but that was a great offense, and he was definitely a linchpin in that offense and put up great numbers. Rico Richardson from Jackson State was the Offensive Player of the Year in 2012. That's something you're not going to see anymore. I don't think I'm gonna go on a limb and say I don't think you'll ever see a receiver win this award ever again unless they make Jerry Rice type numbers and break all the records because it's a quarterback's award now. So to put up 60 catches, 1,163 yards, 11 touchdowns, and win SWAC Offensive Player of the Year, that's a great single season. I don't care how you look at it. I know there's some guys who have better numbers after that or even before that, but to win that award definitely is a great thing. And like I said, something that you probably never see for quite some time. Um, and you always want to recognize a guy like that to put up those kind of numbers on a team who went to the SWAC championship, but came up short. But that's a guy, like I said, that doesn't happen, and because of that, you have to recognize you have to put him on this list. There's no way I would leave a guy off like that because that's history, and that's something that may not happen again. And finally, to close out this list, like I said, I didn't want to go too deep. I mean, of course, there's a lot of other guys that probably could have been put on this list, but I wanna throw another guy in here, and he probably had greater seasons, but that's Jonte Abear from Prairie View. I really just wanted to get this guy some recognition. Baton Rouge guy, I'm always ride for BR guys. Um, was a kick returner extraordinaire, great running back. Had over had almost 1,000 yards in returns in 2012, averaged 18.8 yards per kick, was a second in the league. He also had a kickoff return for a touchdown and led the SWAC with 121.7 all-purpose yards that year. So didn't really have him on the list. Saw his name pop up, and I wanted to give him some props. Like I said, I know he had some probably better seasons than that, but definitely, you want to recognize a guy who puts up numbers like that, especially all-purpose type of guy. And the last name I had on this list was Lee Doss from Southern. In 2013, he caught 78 passes for 1,172 yards and 11 touchdowns, helping Southern advance to a SWAC championship and win it. Um, I do want to recognize one last guy, and that's Willie Quinn from Southern. In 2015, he had one of the best all-purpose seasons in terms of returns. Um, he was a guy who could break a return at any time. Um, and he was, like I said, he was the type of guy you look at and you like, man, what did this little dude gonna do? But he was able to really put up great numbers in his time as a return man. Um, won awards at that position, and just really was able to break big plays, and then left as Southern's all time leading receiver. Um, that's a guy that you you don't really see a lot of often. In 2015, he tied a FCS record in returns. Um, in returns with what is it? He had five returns in 2015, one shy of tying the FCS single season record of six. Um, he could return punts and kicks, and he was a guy who you definitely had to be aware of him at all times. So wanted to put him on there and give him the love that he deserves, and all these guys deserve the attention and praise. So salute to everybody on this list. Like I said, I wish I could go deeper on it, but finding information on the SWAC after a certain point in time is like trying to find information from the dark ages. I think our schools and conferences and everybody involved in the documenting and saving the records and things like that, I think they dropped the ball because there's a lot of players um, and teams who don't get the attention that they should because you can't just look them up and pull up information. I understand, once you get past, a certain time period, information always gonna be hard to gather and document, but in the it shouldn't be that hard to find information in 2010 and up. So I think that was a big ball drop by the conference and the schools, and because you're robbing a lot of these guys of getting that attention. And then if you had that, you wouldn't have to do a lot of shows like this. But I wanted to recognize these guys on my way back Wednesday, and that's gonna do it for me. Swag Smoke coming at you tomorrow, 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern. We're gonna talk about the 2019 Magic City Classic. We're gonna sit down and I'm gonna watch the game. Big Soldier gonna watch the game. We're gonna come back and talk about it on the show. So if you wanna be a part of it and chime in on your thoughts on that game, it's on YouTube. You can watch it and then come to the show and we'll talk about it and have a good time. So with that being said, man, I'm your tour guide around the SWAC. See what else coming at you and enjoy the rest of your evening. Peace.